Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaykum, everyone. I hope that you're all safe and well wherever you are. It's a very fragile moment for Muslims. It feels very precarious. The air feels quite heavy. Last couple of weeks, I've felt like that. I hope that you're safe and well wherever you are. And I hope that, inshallah, Allah eases the suffering of the many Muslims who are facing a war of aggression and those who have been facing persecution for a number of years, inshallah, that Allah will alleviate their suffering. In this brief video, I'm going to share some further reflections on the concept of Qawwam. And if you recall, I had set out some detail in a video about a month ago where I had talked about the Quranic word Qawwam and the different explanations of that word in our Tafsir literature, in exegesis. But then I had also talked about the shift from Qawwam to Qiwamah, which institutionalizes this concept and gives it, makes it a concept of authority and power. Now, since I released this video, I have been reading all the comments that have come through, and in some of the comments, there are some really great insights and reflections. And there were a couple of excellent questions in there as well, which I want to delve into today. At the end of this video, I will also give you detail about how you can support my channel as a member, and also how you can keep up to date with the latest news on webinars and courses that I'm offering via my website. So I will give you that detail at the end. So here are the two questions then. The first question is, if we understand the meaning of Qawwam in this way, how would a Muslim household be led in practical terms? What kind of norms or dynamics do you feel naturally grow from this understanding? So just to quickly recap, I had said that Qawwam, the Quranic concept of Qawwam in the case of marriage, in the context of marriage, is actually about responsibility. So it is a verse of responsibility towards women. And it's actually quite a revolutionary verse because it is telling men that they cannot exploit women, but henceforth they must be supporters of women. And supporters are people who hold you up, people that you can lean on, people who will not stand in your way if you want to pursue your ambitions and your dreams, people who would consult you and walk with you, and that's kind of the concept of Qawwam that I have given. And in a later video, I've also talked about the softer aspects of marriage that the Quran highlights for us. The Quran talks about marriage in very beautiful terms, and it uses words like rahma, which is mercy or compassion. It uses words like tranquility, sakina. So it uses the word sakina or sakan, which is about living together in tranquility. It talks about muwadda, which is about profound affection or love between the spouses. And so the Quranic idea of, and I'm not using the word ideal here, okay? The Quranic idea of marriage and the Quranic conceptualization of marriage is actually very soft. Within that, there are certain social roles that the Quran talks about. And we have to remember that men's ability to be breadwinners, to financially maintain a family and support women, comes from their access to capital, their access to economic opportunity. And both those things are actually contingent, so they can change. Similarly, a man's health can change, and there are often cases where women step up and become Qawwam. There are now many, many cases where women earn as much as their husbands do, or many earn more than what their husbands do, because now women can go to university, get high level skills and qualifications, and be very successful in their careers. And so the socio-historical context in which the Quran was revealed is very different from the socio-historical context in our contemporary times. And so when we talk about what happens in practical terms, I think one of the things that I want to encourage my listeners here is to perhaps step away from the idea that there is one successful model for a marriage. Do we even need norms or models for a marriage? Do we even need to set out how decisions should be made? The reason why I say that is the Quran does not give us any model as such. The Quran talks to its immediate reality in very practical terms, as I've just explained. It takes a socio-historical realities, socioeconomic realities into its consideration. We know that the Quran also talks about marriage in the terms of those soft values. Those values are very universal, they're very human, so we can relate to those values immediately. What then emerges is, in the case of a marriage, a very unique relationship. And I have spoken about that uniqueness before. One of the unique aspects of marriage is that it is between two consenting adults who decide to commit to each other for their lifetimes. That's quite unique. We can sometimes have very long-term friendships, but marriage is a unique relationship, which is about long-term commitment. And it is also a contractual relationship. So there are legal obligations that result from a marriage. Marriage is also a relationship, uniquely so, where there is physical intimacy between the husband and the wife. And as a result of that physical intimacy, you can also bring children into the world. And so when you bring a child into the world, then you're talking about a very, very long-term commitment. So those of us who have raised children know that for about the first 17, 18 years of their life, there is a lot of intensive parenting that needs to happen. And in fact, even later, your role changes as a parent, but you still are responsible for your children for a very long period of time. And the human infant is born very weak and very dependent. Unlike, if you look around you in the animal kingdom, when a calf is born to a deer, for example, within minutes it can stand up on its two legs. Same with horses. You would see that. Even same with little baby goats. They would immediately be up on their feet. They would be able to feed. The human infant is not like that. The human infant takes a long, long time to develop. And so marriage is an institution with its long-term commitment that enables all of that to happen, to create a very stable nest where children can flourish. So what kind of dynamics or models can we create here? I don't think that we can create a model or an ideal. What would be ideal in a marriage, if I'm using the word ideal again, but what would be desirable in a marriage is that the two spouses respect each other, love each other, have affection for each other. Once that is in place, some of the decision making flows from that automatically. Now, the Quran gives us a very interesting example. I believe it is in Surah Al-Baqarah, where there is discussion around weaning a child, so bringing a child into this world and then weaning the child off the mother's breast milk. And the Quran says that weaning can take up to 30 months. So it is a long period of time. But very interestingly, in that verse, Allah also says that a woman can actually demand payment for breastfeeding, because breastfeeding is a very big commitment. And if the weaning is to be done, then it should be done. So when the child is taken off the breast milk, then it should be done after mutual consultation. So that's a very practical decision which is being made in a marriage. And the Quran is guiding us to consult with each other. So if we do want to come up with a norm or a dynamic for a marriage, I would say that perhaps the most successful marriages are the more consultative marriages, because marriages need to pivot. It's a very long relationship, so it needs to flex, it needs to move depending on circumstances. And those circumstances can be very challenging sometimes. There can be financial challenges, there can be health challenges, there can be challenges around children, how they're adjusting in school, how they're making friends. Sometimes there is also disability or a medical condition, either for the spouses or the child, that needs to be taken into account. So marriages as a relationship require a lot of resilience and flexibility in them. And consultation enables the married couple to create that resilience, to be able to deal with the eventualities that life can throw their way. So I think that a dynamic that grows from that place of respect and affection, compatibility around values, and respect for each other as adults, autonomous adults who have decided to join together in this partnership. And if that partnership is underpinned by consultation, then I feel that that's probably a really good, I don't want to say an exact model, but perhaps an approach to creating kind of that success and longevity and resilience in the relationship. So I think that is what grows from this understanding that the Quran is giving us as well, because it's drawing our attention constantly to the really soft things like look after each other's dignity. So the Quran says that men and women are libas of each other, we're garments of each other. So look after each other's dignity, cover for each other, give physical comfort to each other. Libas gives us comfort as well. Libas also gives us dignity in terms of how we carry ourselves in front of society. So by saying that husband and wife are libas of each other, the Quran is also bringing into that the ideas of modesty and privacy and warmth and comfort for each other. So the Quran uses very, very soft words for marriage. And I think if the focus is on that, the rest follows. Then financial decision making becomes easier because both spouses sit together and they look at what's possible, what's not possible, what needs to be compromised on, what does not need to be compromised on, what is affordability like, what are our priorities as a family, what is more important, to pay private school fees for a child or to buy a new car or buy a new house. So those discussions can happen from a place of respect. So that's my answer in terms of practical terms, is to allow the values-driven framework of marriage that we find in the Quran and allow that to help shape the relationship. But every relationship would be very unique simply because the two adults who are deciding to live together in a marriage, in that long-term relationship, are very unique individuals. And so I always feel that marriages have very successful marriages. They all have quite a unique dynamic to them because the marriage is between two people who are unique individuals. They bring their own talents, they bring their own perspectives, they bring their values, their beliefs, their approach to how they would deal with crisis, etc. What helps though is if the two parties, the husband and the wife, complement each other. When one person's energy is down, the other person's energy is a bit better, and that helps smooth out some of those wrinkles. So yeah, I think it's very difficult to say what a perfect model needs to be. I don't think that there is such a thing. I think what a married couple can aspire to are those sets of values that the Quran has set out, and an approach to decision making which is based on consultation. So I hope that answers the first question. The second question is about a man's status as Qawwam. So the question is, because a man is Qawwam, a supporter or maintainer, and he has the responsibility to provide for the whole family, doesn't he have some of the authority? Because as we know, that both authority and responsibility go hand in hand. Now, this is a really, really good question, but this question is also quite broad, and I think it has quite blurry edges, and I'll explain that in a second. If you really want to drill down to practicalities, we would say, yeah, the person who holds the debit card, the person who holds the checkbook, the person who writes all the checks and signs them off is the person who's in charge. Because at the end of the day, if there is one breadwinner in the household, whether that's the husband or the wife, if there's one breadwinner, they would be able to say, this is what our affordability is like for this particular decision, whether it's to buy a car or a new piece of furniture or a house or send a child to a particular school or whatever the decision is. So the person who has access to funds and savings is very likely to be the person who might say yes or no. But yes or no to what? Yes or no to a question of affordability. And it's important that we define what we mean by authority or decision making, because decision making happens in different realms. Decision making happens in different fields, different areas. Decision making changes with time. When children are younger, decision making is very different. What to feed them? How are they eating their vegetables? Are they eating their fruits? Do we want to feed them things out of a packet? Do we want to take them out for exercise? So your decision making might be like that. When children are older, there's decision making around, okay, what can we afford to spend on my daughter's wedding, for example. So decision making changes with time, and decision making is also down to the exact financial circumstances of the family, but also educational circumstances as well. So for example, let's say it's a household where both the husband and the wife earn, and the husband is a school teacher and the wife works in a bank. Now, because of her expertise in banking or finance, she might be better able to give advice around financial investments. And so the husband can look up to her for that advice. But when it comes to schooling or approaches to teaching, or how to help children do their homework, the husband might be the person who is the expert, actually, because he's a school teacher. And so when we talk about authority and responsibility, we have to think about what particular domain are we talking about. If we're only talking about financial decision making, then again, I would hope that based on the Quranic approach around marriage, the Quranic view of marriage to bring sakina, tranquility into the household, that the best decisions would be mutually consulted decisions. Because consultation is ever so important. If one person starts to dismiss another person's views simply because of their gender, then we have an issue. And certainly, in traditional discussions around marriage, this idea is given that a man is Qawwam, he is authority, he has authority over everything. He can tell his wife what to wear, what not to wear. He can tell his wife whether she can study further or not. He can allow her or forbid her from doing a job. He can allow her or forbid her from going out of the house. This is an abuse of the word Qawwam as it is mentioned in the Quran. In the Quran, Qawwam is about supporting women. Why do women need support in the first place? Why did women need support in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time? Why do they need support now? Because the Quran recognizes women as an oppressed group of people. It frequently talks about their oppression. It talks about female children, even newborn babies being killed, buried alive. It talks about women being sold as property against their will. The Quran tells us that men used to force women into prostitution. They used to force their slaves or concubines into prostitution. Those verses are in the Quran. So the Quran talks about women as a vulnerable group, as an oppressed group that needs to be lifted up. Not downtrodden or suppressed, but lifted up. And so Qawwam that is why the verse is so revolutionary. When a man is Qawwam, he is helping lift up that person rather than suppress that person. But unfortunately, the way our traditional circles talk about Qawwam, they talk about Qawwam as suppression. So even if a man is the sole breadwinner, that does not give him the right to suppress a woman's hopes and dreams and ambitions. But in actuality, this is what happens. And I think that the question then, when it comes to authority and responsibility, is around entitlement. Because I was actually having this conversation just last night. We've just finished the online Nujum sessions that I was running for Ramadan. And our topic for discussion at the last session was Islamic feminism. And we were talking about the term Islamic feminism, whether we need to use that term or not use that term. And I posed a question to everyone around what is the mechanism of power? Okay, so I'll give you an example. I live in the UK. It is a country which has signed up to the European Human Rights Framework, and it considers men and women to be equal. Men and women have equal autonomy, are equal in autonomy in the legal agency, and they're considered fully human, basically, right? So their intellectual ability, their autonomy, their agency, there is legal equality in this country. But even then, it is entirely possible for Muslim households to exist in Britain where men have absolute authority over women. The question then is, if that authority is not legal, which it isn't here in this country, there is no law saying that men are Qawwam or men will decide, then where does that authority come from? And if we look at the mechanism through which patriarchy exerts its power, it's through creating a sense of entitlement. And this is really important to understand. The sense of entitlement works in really sinister ways. It's things like if a woman is spending her entire day looking after young children and she's absolutely shattered, she's done, 15 hours of work already. Her husband comes home and he demands that she puts fresh food on the table for him, that she brews a fresh cup of tea or coffee for him while he just sits and watches TV. Now we've created a sense of entitlement, because if the man is the breadwinner, then he becomes automatically entitled to be served hand and foot. Whereas if you flip it, and if a woman is in work, when she comes back home, she might find the house messy. She might find that dinner's not been cooked because she's expected to do household work, to do her work in a job and then also do household work. And so entitlements get created. Some of these entitlements in extreme forms show up as domination of women. It's really interesting. This is something that's been recognized in law by Italy. So just very recently, they've passed a law where they have declared femicide, which is the murder of women, femicide to be a crime in its own category. And they've recognized that that crime is committed because there is the need to dominate and control women that men exhibit. So the murderer exhibits that need to dominate and control, and he feels entitled to take a woman's life. So the mechanism around Qawwam and the patriarchal family, where man is in charge, who controls everything, who controls even the movement of his wife, his daughters, even his sisters, that happens because that entitlement is created and entrenched in family relationships. It's also part of that entitlement that women's unpaid labor is not recognized or acknowledged. So women's unpaid labor remains invisible. If you look at the statistics on that, and by the way, that's across the board, not just in Muslim countries, even in advanced economies, European countries, this happens. If you look at the statistics from the International Labor Organization, they would tell you that mothers who have young children provide 60 hours of unpaid labor at home. Women who have caring responsibilities, so they're caring for someone elderly, might then be providing unpaid labor on top of that. Okay. Now, if you pay a childminder in the UK to look after your children, I'm going to assume you pay about £20 an hour, then 60 hours of work is £1,200 every week. That's £4,800 a month. That is much higher than a graduate wage in this country. That is the amount of unpaid labor that women put in. In the UK, women put in more than £1 trillion worth of unpaid labor into the country's GDP, the country's gross domestic product. So with this entitlement around Qawwam also comes an appropriation of resources. And the resource in this case is a woman's unpaid labor. So when we talk about Qawwam and we talk about authority and responsibility, we have to be very careful about what is the domain in which we're having this conversation. If it's just about signing off a check to buy a new sofa, that's a different conversation. But if you then allow the man to control a woman's movement, to tell her what she can eat or not eat, to tell her when to cook food, to get angry and smash things if she doesn't prepare a fresh meal for him. If she wants to study further, he curtails her ambitions and he says, no, you must look after the children, rather than saying, okay, we can look after children together. Again, going back to that mutuality and consultation that the Quran talks about all the time, being libas for each other, protecting each other. If all of that is abandoned and this whole conversation becomes a conversation around authority, which really is a conversation around entitlement, then we have a real problem. Then we have turned the Quran's absolutely revolutionary verse about uplifting women. In a marriage, be supportive to women and uplift them from the faddala, the tafdeel, the preference that God has given you. What is the preference? You control the means of production. Allah is telling men that you have more access to economic resources like capital and labor. You can use that to uplift women. And now in our modern times, men can use the privilege that they have under patriarchal systems to again uplift women. Okay, so I want us to have this conversation in those more nuanced terms, and to look at the complexity that we then eventually have to delve into, because it's not just about just saying a men are Qawwam. We don't often realize the consequences of saying that and the sense of entitlement we create. It is that sense of entitlement that eventually leads to the kind of abuse or suppression or oppression that we unfortunately sometimes see in Muslim households or traditional Muslim households. So I hope that that answers your question as well. Now then, a few calls to action before I finish. I have recently launched YouTube memberships. There are 2 tiers to the membership: Explorer and Supporter. A few people have joined already. Jazakallah, thank you so much for supporting my work. By joining as a member, you are supporting my channel. You're helping me reach a bigger audience. And inshallah, when Ramadan finishes, there will be some advanced member-only content coming out as well. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my channel. I do have quite a high subscription rate from viewers, but I still find that about 30 to 40% have not subscribed. So if you are benefiting from my research, if you're listening to my videos very regularly, please subscribe to my channel. Again, that is going to help me take the message out to a bigger audience. And if you hit like and if you share with your family and friends, you're also helping get the message out. So thank you so much for those who are already doing that. I'm seeing my likes and shares go up quite significantly. Thank you very much. You can also sign up to my newsletter to receive the latest on upcoming webinars and courses that I am gradually uploading on my website. My website is www.sitaraakram.com. Just sign up to the newsletter and you will get the latest information. I promise not to clog up your mailbox with lots of emails. I will only send the newsletter out sporadically to give you the latest news or to share some reflections with you. And lastly, I hope that you have a lovely Eid with your family and friends. I know this Ramadan has felt a bit heavier. This Ramadan has felt like a bit of a test for the collective Muslim community. Please join me in sending a dua to Allah to ease the suffering of our Muslims, brothers and sisters who are facing aggression and persecution in Gaza, in Iran, in Lebanon. There are 800,000 people now displaced in Lebanon, including 200,000 children. And I was sat at home thinking, do those children not deserve a roof over their head or the privacy of going to a toilet or being able to go to school and spend the day with their friends? I mean, it's just, I think that there comes a point where it becomes quite impossible to cognitively process that amount of suffering and pain. But I do hope that at this very fragile moment for the Muslim community, that our community comes together. I hope that Allah turns the tide soon to alleviate the suffering of our fellow Muslims and for them to enjoy peace and safety and prosperity. So please join me in that prayer. I hope you have a lovely Eid, inshallah, and I will be in touch again next Sunday as usual with another video. Take care, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.